This is Comfortable Shoes Studio and another episode of art making. It'll be a little bit more of an instructional video on talking through using a brush pen with ink in it and a ink wash brush, and then finally a final pen for line. So in this technique, instead of doing a contour line drawing where you find the outside line of the object that you are drawing and then recreate that on the page, in this technique you look for the shadows. Um, so this um, brown ink is representing not just the darkest darks, but sort of the middle darks as well. Not quite the mid-tone values, but like darks and slightly less darks. And this ink is water soluble, so I know when I go over it with the ink wash in a minute, it will lift, blend, and move and give the whole page a brown tone, which is actually what I'm looking for. That is a look that I enjoy. It's kind of like sepia mixed with ink wash. So that was the Pentel Pocket Brush Pen filled with brown Carcos ink. Pretty good ink for the job. Now, this pen is a water brush. It is filled with ink wash, and this ink wash is 60 milliliters of filtered or distilled water with 40 drops of India ink in it. And that's about 2 ounces of water, still with 40 drops of ink. I used an eyedropper to drop the ink in there. So this gives me my lightest dark areas. So this truck was white. This side of it was in shadow as I was looking at it. There's a little bit of reflected light here and there, but not a whole lot. So the great thing about this pen, or this India ink, the ink wash, is that it will lift and blend the brown, but once the black, or the gray in this case, is dried, it's set in place. It's India ink, it's not moving. All right, so this is my dark ink wash, and it's 60 milliliters of water with 70 drops of ink in it, and it's significantly darker than the other ink wash brush. So I'm just going in, filling in the darkest dark areas. It looks a lot lighter on the screen than it does in person. So this is really just layering over that brown, adding in a few details here and there, but just getting those darks in. So I will use the pen to get details and the darkest darks. Um, so here you're seeing the darker grays getting put in, layering it over the brown. It's just going to layer and create darker darks, adding some details in those shadows in the already dark areas. And there's all of the shadows done. I'm just going to go over it with the it's a Jinhao 92 with a fude nib. And I am working on this page, and it's quite damp. It's been cool. This day was particularly cool. Um, and while it was sunny, it had also rained a lot. So it's a kind of damp, cool day. So I correct some of the areas where the shadows are and get the darkest dark areas. So I am allowing the black ink in some areas. It sort of floods the area because the ink below it is still wet. So I really like this technique. This feels much more natural to me than contour line. Contour line is a great tool. It really does help you see the lines of everything around you. But this is also a great learning technique. It lets you see the shapes and the shadows of things. And for me, this technique feels a lot more natural. It is a bit more of a painting technique, I think, 'cause you're kind of looking at areas that need to be blocked in And when you're painting, that's something that you do. You look for blocks of color, blocks of area to work. Um, and so that's a truck done. So this day was, like I said, very cold. It was also super windy out. Um, and so I was working in my car. So I headed to a different section of the park and decided to draw this van. So again, blocking things in. I'm using skills that, yeah, I've worked on with contour line drawing. But I've also like worked on these in painting and watercolors. So just kind of blocking in those shadows again. Again, so the front of this van is in bright light, and the side facing me is in shadow. The sunlight this morning was particularly fantastic for light and shadow on vehicles. This is a big boxy, I don't know if this is a Sprinter van, I don't know what it was. Big boxy van, getting those tires in, trying to make sure they're on the same level and in perspective and proportion. Now I'm using a water brush this time. I've got a fair amount of ink on the page, so I'm lifting the brown ink to move it around. So I'm trying to create lighter shades of shadow. I was trying to see if I could how much I could move this ink, how much ink I needed to have on the page to have it move well. And I'm pretty happy with how this ink moved. It's obviously not perfect, but I think it did a good job. So this is another faux ink wash technique. You know, I'm taking the ink that I put on the page and I'm moving it around like it's a watercolor. And the water brush does really well for that. Um, and I'm pretty, yeah, it's like I'm getting a lot of that ink moved around, and I'm pretty happy with how it moves. So now you're seeing I'm using that to get the shape of the front of the van in, and it is not as in shadow. It's there are some areas of shadow in even the light area. So I'm using the moved ink to create sort of lighter shadows and the tone of the vehicle. So here we're getting the darker areas, and I'm using um, again the water brush, and this is, I believe, this is the darker ink. I have them designated on the barrel with the dark ink wash has two stripes of washi tape. The light ink wash has one stripe of washi tape. This one has two, so it's my dark ink wash. So here I am blocking in the shadows, getting the darker areas of shadow mapped out. So it's the same technique, but instead of using, the light ink wash to move the brown ink, I am using the dark, or I used a water brush to move the ink around and going straight to my dark ink wash. And here I'm getting my fude nib, and with this one, it's very much still wet. So those dark areas are going to get much darker as this pen, you can see it spreading out. I'm really happy with the Roar and Cleaner ink for this. It does move quite nicely on wet paper. It also glides really well otherwise. So you see in the areas where it is dry, it's not moving. It just stays at the right line length. And yeah, getting those details, getting the outline. Now I'm sort of adding the contour line to this van. And depending on what you want and like, you don't necessarily have to add the outside lines. I think some of this, um, van would have looked quite nice even without the outer lines. Now, what I could have done if I had, wanted to just keep it to tonal values, light and shade, and all of that, um, I could have painted the stuff around the van in with ink wash, just to give it kind of a hint. I've done that before with trees. Um, I think the parking lot was pretty empty, so that's why I didn't use that as an option. Didn't always block in like another vehicle or trees or shrubs or a fence, whatever's behind um, what you're drawing to block it off. I use that sometimes in portraiture where the side of the face doesn't need the details, so I will use either the hair or something behind the subject to make them look more like they're lighted. So that's the technique. It's really a matter of getting some ink on the page, moving that ink around either with a brush pen or a um, ink wash in a brush pen. So those water brushes are really versatile for this sort of thing. And, the cheaper ones are fantastic for filling with ink. I wouldn't fill them with watercolor. I know some people do, but watercolors have particulates in them. So, I mean, if you're using a liquid watercolor, that would work. You could definitely thin that down, add a little water, make it flow really well, and that might not clog the pens up. But those cheap water brushes, because they don't flow as well with water, or they flow too well, or just the mechanism isn't as nice, this is what I use them for. I fill them up with ink wash or ink. I've got a couple with magenta, and another with yellow. So it's a great way to kind of use a water brush that might not work so well. So anyway, with that, I'd love to see if you try this technique out. Share that with me, so I can, I don't know, just really enjoy it. I love looking at other people's art. Um, so thank you for being here. I really enjoy seeing all of the comments and the views that are coming in. I appreciate all of the likes and comments and everything. It really does make my day to know that people get some value out of the videos that I'm posting. And so thanks for being here. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time. Oh, hey, if you really, really, really like the video, head over to my Ko-fi account. Links in the description. Thanks and bye.